All right, welcome to the party, pals, GRC Mafia. So right out of the gate, we're here to break down barriers, foster collaboration and community, working towards a more secure future for everybody. Definitely a learning and growing environment. And then also, if you guys have any questions or topics to discuss, definitely drop those in chat. You can also put that in our Discord server as well. Even if it doesn't pertain to exactly what we're talking about, worst case scenario, we could circle back around to that. And if I do happen to miss over a question or a topic or otherwise, feel free to go ahead and drop it again or just to remind me and let me know. I'll be the only one behind the glass, it looks like today, so I may miss a couple things as I swap through some of the different windows that I'll be showing. So this is our part 3 of 5 videos for the HITRUST Risk Assessment Handbook. Now, if you guys are not familiar, there's a 5-part webinar series, which I'll drop that link here in just a moment, but we'll start getting into that here in just a second. I definitely want everybody to be encouraged to come up on stage if you would like to. Everybody's encouraged to do so. I'm going to go ahead and drop the stage link right now before I forget. You do not have to turn on your video. You could just do microphone only if you'd like to join the conversation directly. Also, whether you're in chat or you come up on stage, just don't share anything that you don't want to be public. If you happen to do so, reach out to me on Discord, LinkedIn, or you can also reach me at contact@studygrc.org. All right. And then also we have our website as well, which one of the big showcases on that is our resources page, which I'm also dropping in chat. Our resources page is full of different GRC related resources from NIST and ISO and other frameworks, standards, and regulations. There's currently a list of a bunch of different certifications. And we're starting to kind of migrate that over a little bit differently. So that way we can categorize it by certification and then resources related to that with a foundation of like a mindset of free and accessible first. So that's not always going to be possible, especially when you're looking at things like training material for certification. But still, there's different resources out there and we're going to prioritize that free and accessible options. So definitely give that a look. And of course, the Discord server that I had already dropped. Now, we do not currently have any paid sponsors or otherwise. However, definitely want to encourage everybody to check out BrittWhite.io. And so that's B-Dubs' website. She publishes a GRC and cybersecurity related blog article every single Monday. And let me go ahead and drop that in chat real quick. And then also the ongoing CISSP study group, which I think is coming down to like the last month and a half or so. That's like a 30 or 32 session series covering all of the domain objectives for the CISSP, 100% free. It's live streamed onto B-Dubs' YouTube channel. And then everybody hops into voice chat in the Discord server afterwards. It's an incredible free resource and it's definitely friendly to everybody. So no matter where you're at in your journey, you could still hop in there, watch the videos and so forth. If you guys have questions, comment on the video, hop into Discord, ask a question and so forth. Sus. Which part's sus? Space tacos. And then we also, I wanted to shout out to PBO. So you guys are probably familiar with PBO. But PBO is also an awesome resource to check out. He goes live every single Tuesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern. And he has, over 822 videos now, almost all GRC related. If you go over to his playlist, you can also see this government compliance for cybersecurity, which not only has all of the different family groups for the 853, but also a bunch of other regulations, standards, frameworks, and so forth as well. Really awesome resource. Now I'm going to go ahead and transition over here. So this is the webinar series that this is in regards to. So there's 5 webinar videos here. That's freely accessible. No login or personal information has to be shared. We have already covered the first 2 videos. And so the purpose of today is to just further discuss and kind of cover the 3rd video out of 5. And then again, for the next 2 weeks at 11 a.m. on Thursday, Central Time, we'll be covering the last 2 videos here as well. Each one has its own topic. And so like the one today is using the work of others in a HITRUST assessment. And kind of the goal of this is for you guys to actually watch this ahead of time or otherwise, or bring other questions. If I don't know something, Hopefully somebody else does, or worst case scenario, we could go ahead and reach out to HITRUST and get an answer for that as well. I'm going to go ahead and drop this in chat as well. Yeah, and welcome to the party, pal. I see Cam, Space Tacos, Brexy. Oh, okay. Space Tacos just likes the emoji. Okay. I was a little worried there for a second because, like, you just hop in and you're like, sus. I'm like, geez, did I say something wrong? And yeah, Brexy, Space Tacos, Cam, welcome to the party, pals, GRC Mafia. Plus, we have our Thursday meeting tonight as well for the job readiness and group resume review. But I dropped this link in chat. And so if you guys didn't go through and watch this, that's fine too. It is freely accessible if you guys want to go through it. Primarily what it covers is this chapter 12 third-party coverage, the Reliance and third-party coverage. So we can kind of skim through some of this material and so forth. There was also a really cool thing on this video. So if I spot back over here, there's this decision board that they also made throughout this. And unfortunately, it's a pretty low res. They don't seem to have made this like publicly available in a high res download. So like even for me, the text is a little blurry, but you can still kind of make it out and so forth for decision making on whether or not you can use somebody else's work or not in a HITRUST assessment. And what a large portion of this comes down to is whether they're a third party or not. Are they a vendor of yours? Do they have HITRUST themselves? Because you could import from like one account to another account type of thing. And then also, are there internal, external, etc. But in large part, like it's pretty suggested. I mean, they really do position it like use as much information as you can that's already available. Let me double check here. All right. Oh, now we got Brexy popping in with the sus. Go figure. Yeah, I got to add more of the emojis too. I think we still have a few more slots I can add more to. All right, let's see here. But yeah, did anybody have any particular questions with it? Otherwise, we can just kind of skim through this section here. So like I said, it pretty much covers the chapter 12 out of the assessment handbook. And let me go ahead and share this link in chat as well, just so it's there as well. Welcome to the party, pal, Josh. It is Friday Eve. Well, close enough. I mean, that is kind of the point of the emojis too, Space Tacos. Oh, I didn't realize I put the Illuminati one in there too. Yeah, if there's any particular emojis you guys want that's missing, let me know, especially in the Discord server. That's one of the biggest benefits of it. But yeah, so third-party coverage. So the decision to rely on work of others lies solely on the external assessor. So we talked before in regards to HITRUST when the individual from HITRUST did the talk for us on the fact that an external assessor is required to go through the entire assessment. And it lies directly on them. That external assessor who actually submits and puts everything into the system for CSF is ultimately responsible on whether the work of others is allowed within the assessment. And they can kind of pick and choose that as well. So as the external assessor is ultimately accountable for validating an assessed entity's implementation of the HITRUST, and that's why it's up to them. When using the work of others, the external assessor should take care to design a validated assessment testing strategy that ensures that they are still sufficiently involved in the validated assessment. So even if they use somebody else's work, like let's say an internal assessor goes through and does an assessment, even directly following HITRUST, that external assessor would still have to go through and pick and choose and do some type of validation assessment. Ensure it's correct. Oh, look at that. We got PBO hopping in chat. GRC Mafia. So then they have some of the different requirements here as well. So like 12.1.1, the assessed entity and or external assessor must identify all in-scope third parties during validated assessment planning and determine the testing strategy for the corresponding third party prior to field work. So that's what I was just mentioning, is that, you know, it's really up to that external assessor, and then they also have to do some type of testing strategy as well prior to field work. 12.1.2, when an assessed entity and or external assessor is unable to utilize the below testing approaches to obtain coverage of the in-scope third party, scoring in the assessment must reflect that those requirement statements were not compliant for the corresponding third party. Must reflect that those requirement statements. Yeah, and this is also where it gets a little bit different too, because they have their different control groups as well. So like I1 and E1, it mentions here for the assessment types. They have the ability for carve out for third parties from the scope of the assessment. And then they have that documented in Chapter 7 for scoping the assessment. So what is actually involved in the first place? What is it actually addressing? 12.1.4, assessed entities should adopt policies requiring third parties to maintain each relevant requirement within the CSF framework. And it doesn't even say that they must implement. It says that they must maintain each of the relevant HITRUST requirements. It's the little triangle one. So the little triangle with the eye in it is the Illuminati one. Yeah, the one Josh just did. And so on my end, inside of Restream, it just shows me this text Illuminati. And so thankfully I know what the emojis are in there, but yeah. HITRUST recognizes 4 different distinct strategies which can be used by an external assessor to approach testing of third parties. So using inheritance, which inheritance was a huge section of this webinar. So I would probably say like a good quarter or maybe a third of it was talking about inheritance, and there's 2 different types that relate to inheritance, and that's pretty important as well. That's probably going to be the most common. So that's like off of a previous assessment, or from a vendor that may have HITRUST as well, that you could import or otherwise or attach to it. Reliance on audits and or assessments performed by a third party, on testing performed by the assessed entity, or direct testing of third party controls. And then on to the next section right here. Reliance on assessment results using inheritance. So the 2 different types that they mention here. So they have the option of internal or external. So internal inheritance uses the inheritance functionality to share assessment results between assessments of a single organization. So like the IT service and the business unit, for an example, internal inheritance. Or you can also do the external inheritance, which would be like between the CSP, the cloud service provider, its tenants, or, you know, if you're using some type of SaaS product that may have HITRUST or otherwise, then there's an ability to inherit that as well. Yeah, that is one issue, is especially on mobile, it might be difficult to see. We have the same ones in the Discord server as well. YouTube just doesn't allow us to add too many of them for the emojis. All right, let's see here. So this is actually a pretty important section to recall for HITRUST, is the inheritance of internal and external. as the options there. And then 12.2.1, inheritance into a validated or readiness assessment for any assessment type is allowed the following assessment types while the certification or validated only report for each assessment is active and in good standings. So based on, E1, I1, R2, the inheritance is validated or readiness assessment. You can use it for those. Note for R2 validated only, non-certified reports, inheritance is only allowed 1 year from the report date. And so that's also like one of the little star things that they have here for that note for the R2. It has to be within the 12-month, 1 year from the report date. 12.2.1, inheritance from a readiness or incomplete validated assessment for any assessment type is only allowed into a readiness assessment, utilized internal inheritance. Inheritance from those assessments is not allowed into a validated assessment since it is not complete in the HITRUST quality assurance review process. So chapter 14, undergoing quality assurance. So you can't take a readiness or incomplete validated assessment. So the only types that you can do is the validated and completed assessment types that could be inherited. An assessed entity will fall into one of the following roles during the inheritance process. So inheritance user or inheritance provider. So the provider, the assessed entity which owns the inheritable HITRUST assessment. So that would be, especially if you have like internal inheritance, I suppose. Inheritance user, this may also be called a tenant, the assessed entity which owns the inheriting assessment. The inheritance user is placing reliance on controls that were previously assessed and validated in a separate HITRUST assessment. The separate assessment may be owned by another organization, external inheritance, or the same organization, internal inheritance. That's going to be like the go-to, especially when we're talking the cloud service providers, which if you guys watched the HITRUST talk that we had, you would like almost every major cloud service provider has HITRUST at this point. So that does make it easy. Yeah. And then also now they have like a AI thing as well. So I think it's like AI-2 or something along those lines too. Which I'm not even going to try to guess what those are. In the handbook, it does actually state what the E, R, and I stand for. But I'm not going to try to recall that off the bat. I'm probably going to get it wrong. One of the interesting things is, so the E1 is the lowest tier that they have, which I think, if I remember correctly, they stated that there's about 55 controls or so, which is, I think it might actually be 52 controls. And in the E1, which is their lowest tier option, which is like the bare minimum best practices. And that's usually the starting point. But also one of the key factors with that too is if you wanted to, you could just stay at E1. Like I was originally thinking like, HITRUST would require you to go E1 to R2 or I1 and so forth, and move up the tiers kind of like you would a profile, like with NIST CSF. But with, or even with CIS, for an example, you're always looking to try to progress it further. But you could go ahead and pick E1 and just stay there. So just the bare minimum best practices. Let's see here. So, the inheritance provider. HITRUST has established the following requirements for inheritance users. So, inheritance users may directly apply internal inheritance scores to the corresponding requirement statements. And then they map out to the user guide for the MyCSF. And MyCSF is a platform through HITRUST that you are required to utilize in order to submit your assessments and so forth for quality assurance and to become validated. 1224, an interesting statement there too. I think it's like 19% of the assessments submitted are denied, actually, which I thought was pretty crazy. Pretty high percentage there. Inheritance users must submit all external inheritance requests to the inheritance provider using the automated approval workflow process. I'm actually going to go ahead and pop this open in another tab here. So this is a screenshot. So this is the page that it sends us to for the MyCSF. It looks like a pretty straightforward platform here. And I mean, it's not really giving us a real great overview here, in my opinion, but yeah, so it just links out to the main page for this. Okay, so there is some detailed walkthroughs here as well, along with some screenshots to give us a better idea of what it would look like and some of the steps that we would take. So like for an example, we're in 12. I don't think this corresponds directly with it, with the risk assessment handbook, at least as far as the sections go. Let's see, like pre-assessment, scoping, caps for corrective action plans, inheritance. So like these are the walkthroughs here for MyCSF for the inheritance section. Oh yeah, so you guys may not be able to see this part, but at the very bottom here, there's a button that says inheritance. And then it looks like we would click that, and then we would be able to link that out and submit a request and so forth in order to inherit that, you know, from a cloud service provider or a vendor or whatever it is. I'll go ahead and drop this link to the user guide as well. At least they got screenshots for it that are publicly available. Are those boats? All right. Yeah, and so it's stating right here that just the inheritance users must submit through the automated approval workflow process, which was that screenshot that I was showing just a moment ago. 1225, for external inheritance requests, the inheritance user must use the HITRUST shared responsibility matrices, SRMs, that are available for download from MyCSF or the HITRUST website. So if you go through, you can download the kit for MyCSF or for HITRUST CSF. And in that is the spreadsheet for the controls, along with a bunch of other documents, including the assessment handbook PDF. You do have to enter your information for that, but you get the entire kit. And I'm pretty sure that's included in there is the actual PDFs or otherwise for the responsibility matrices. Inheritance users must use the SRM specific to the service provider in scope of its assessment when available. When the service provider does not offer a provider-specific SRM, the inheritance user must use the baseline SRM template. So if it's not included from the vendor or from the provider, then you would just use the baseline template that they provide. Let me double check here. Oh, battleships. I see. Inheritance users must submit all inheritance requests to the inheriting HITRUST assessment prior to the end of the 90-day assessment fieldwork period and no more than 30 days prior to the start of fieldwork. So those are definitely some, hard set requirements there. So prior to the end of the 90-day assessment fieldwork period and no more than 30 days prior to the start of fieldwork. And there was also a diagram that was shown in the presentation we had with HITRUST that showcased the average timeline that you would be looking at. And there are requirements along those lines with that. I mean, it makes sense. I mean, you don't want to be done with your assessment and then be inheriting things and so forth. You want to kind of have that together beforehand. 12.2.9, inheritance users must have a valid business justification for use of inheritance supported by a strategy and approach for the appropriate level of control. Reliance. I mean, money, saving money, I guess would be a good justification to inherit such. I mean, that would be my guess. Yeah, and if anybody wants to come up and so forth, you're more than welcome to. I'm dropping that link again. Let's see here. So requirement statements that have been marked as not applicable NA by the inheritance provider must mark inheritable in the SRM. May not be inherited by the inherited user in their HITRUST assessment for scoring information. Oh, they may be inherited. Okay. So, so if you're inheriting from an external or internal or otherwise, and they marked one of those as not applicable, but they also marked it as inheritable, then you can still utilize that, it looks like. And they also have a whole section on that too, chapter 8.3, for those not applicable requirement statements. HITRUST has established the following requirements for inheritance providers. Yeah. I think the whole process is supposed to take less than 6 months, if that. I don't even think it takes that long. I think the majority of it is, I think it's like 30 days worth of prep work and then no more than 90 days on the assessment. But I'd have to review the presentation again. He had a whole slide on that. But it is a pretty hard set. I mean, it's not so much like with NIST, for an example. NIST doesn't really dictate out on the fact. I mean, it's voluntary for the most part. But, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, PBO, but I don't think there's anything in the 53 that states, oh, you have to have everything submitted within 30 days. I would assume that that would be the organizational policies that might dictate that, you know, but if anything, I mean, it kind of takes, but yeah. Yeah, and then we got David B popping in as well, who does and has disclosed that he works with HITRUST and so forth. Yeah, so this third video with the webinar series that we're going over, we have 2 more out of the 5. So what we've been doing is Thursdays at 11 a.m. Central Time. We're reviewing these and just further discussing it and so forth. And so today's was the third video in the series of 5 for the Risk Assessment Handbook. Was almost all about the inheritance and, you know, whether or not you could use other people's work, which just like David B says here is like, yeah, you might as well. Yeah. And then also I dropped Space Taco's Discord link in chat as well for the GRC Audit Treasure Trove, if you guys haven't checked that out yet. So HITRUST has established the following requirements for inheritance providers. So 12.2.11, for an inheritance provider to allow external inheritance requests, it must enable the use of external inheritance and consent to external inheritance user terms and conditions. Okay, well, that's a little bit different. So you actually would have to consent to inheritance user terms and conditions in the first place inside of MyCSF, which makes sense. And that's for the provider, so inheritance providers. 12.2.11, or I'm sorry, 12.2.12, inheritance providers should process, approve, or reject with comment So they should approve or reject with comment external inheritance requests in a timely manner to help ensure assessed entities are able to apply all approved external inheritance requests before the end of the 90-day assessment fieldwork period. I wonder, I'm just kind of curious. I mean, I guess it doesn't really matter, but when you submit that request, then does that notify that provider that, hey, you know, our field work starts in 45 days, so you guys have 15 days to respond, or something along those lines? Or is it just like, get it done as soon as possible because we don't know? Josh mentions that SOC 2 has audit scope definitions, including timing of the evidences. Is that what this discussion is referring to here in terms of timeframes? Yeah, so that was one part of this, is that it's just like 90 days worth of assessment field work. And then also you have to have your inheritance figured out 30 days prior to the field work. And so it has those hard set timelines there. And that's one of the big differences from something like NIST, for an example. So, I mean, it makes sense. Like with SOC 2, or I think ISO has something similar as well. I don't think Chris H is in chat, but he would know. Yeah, fidelity of inherited stuff. Yeah, that is correct. Oh, you missed all of the other ones? Oh, and everyone else I missed. GRC Mafia. I see. Yeah, welcome to the party, pal, David B. Let's see. So 12.2.13, so inheritance providers must validate the following when considering approving or rejecting an external inheritance request. So a request is from a valid customer of the inheritance provider, so you know you'd have to verify that. The customer has contracted with the inheritance provider. The services and scope of the assessment. The inheritance weight is within the boundaries of the inheritance provider. Has established, or the rationale for a higher weight has been agreed with the inheritance provider. It sounds to me like you would have to do some type of additional verification when you submit that inheritance request. So you'd have to, I mean, especially with like a cloud service provider like AWS, for an example, like that seems like quite a bit of work to have to go through and approve each and every single inheritance request and validate those. I mean, I guess you'd be paying for it one way or another, right? And then also just to mention again here, I'm going to swap back over here. So this is what we're talking about. So we have 2 more videos in this series. The last 2 Thursdays at 11 Central, we went through and covered the first and second video here. And there's a 5-part webinar series that's freely available from HITRUST that covers the assessment handbook itself. And so we're on the 3rd video today. And then next week is going to be the 4th video. The week after that's going to be the 5th video. And then we'll probably move over to some of the other webinars that are related to this or otherwise too. I'm also going to start dribbling in more of the CISO assistant stuff as well. Oh, okay. So HITRUST is the validation. And so the majority of this 3rd video is talking about utilizing the work of others. And so just like David B mentioned a moment ago, is if you can inherit anything, whether it's from a cloud service provider like AWS or Azure, you really should. It's just going to save you a lot of time and probably a significant amount of money. But you could also do it internally. You could do it based on previous assessments and so forth too. But there are quite a few different requirements that you got to make sure as well. The only thing that really caught me there, David B, is that right here it says that the inheritance providers must validate the following when considering approving or rejecting an external inheritance request. And it mentions here that the request is, they have to validate that it's from a valid customer and that the customer has purchased or contracted with the inheritance provider the services and scope of the assessment. So that kind of makes it sound like AWS would have to go to each and every single inheritance request and then validate that particular company and what services they're using and so forth. And I don't know. It sounds like that could be hard to manage. So we ended up throwing together the merch shop itself, like shortly after the Q1 State of Study GRC. And so we do have our merch shop and so forth, definitely looking for other ideas out there. But really like wanted the t-shirts and wanted some merch myself, and the directors did as well. And there were some other community members that were kind of calling for merch in the first place as well. So we threw together that merch shop. But yeah, I got the hat for it now too. So bam, we have the blackout hat and then also a blackout hoodie, because Rania wanted the blackout options. Let's see here. So inheritance providers are eligible. So I think I'm skipping ahead here. 12.2.14, if the inheritance providers has questions or concerns on an inheritance request, I'm going to say that word like at least a few hundred more times, it should engage directly with the inheritance user in a timely manner. Inheritance providers are eligible to create and publish a HITRUST SRM tailored for its inheritable HITRUST assessment. I wonder if AWS has one. The HITRUST SRM provides a mechanism for inheritance providers to communicate expectations to inheritance users to streamline inheritance request processing, partial inheritance weight limits, support contact information, and processing lead times for SLAs. Let me Google this real quick. So AWS SRM HITRUST. So they do have one, but that's weird. So I'm going to go ahead and swap to this page. So on Amazon, I just searched for AWS SRM HITRUST, and it brought me to this AWS security blog, which mentions a AWS HITRUST SRM shared responsibility matrix is now available. But then when I click on this, it just opens up a 404 page on HITRUST. So you got to patch it, I guess. I mean, I'm sure it's somewhere in here, but yeah, I'm just looking over this real quick. I was just kind of curious if we could look at the actual shared responsibility matrix for AWS and HITRUST, but I don't see it. I'm not seeing it immediately, but it's probably out there somewhere. All right. Yes, absolute sellout. I love my merch. All right, so David says, so AWS, the valid customer, uses HITRUST, and then HITRUST agrees they are valid customers of HITRUST. And then if applicable, they approve or deny the request. But so if I am using AWS and I want to inherit their assessment, then wouldn't I be submitting an inheritance request to AWS? That's what it sounds like to me, is that if I'm using AWS and I want to inherit their assessment in order to obtain mine, then I would be submitting that inheritance request to AWS through my CSF. Copied or shared indiscriminately. Yeah. That's odd, but yeah. I mean, the shared responsibility matrix, though, I don't know. That's weird. That they wouldn't want it copied or shared. But, I mean, I think that's also where HITRUST does get their, you know, paywalls, you know, anti-transparency, you know, feeling with. But, I mean, it sounds like HITRUST is trying to make a difference as far as the transparency and so forth goes. So we'll see how time goes. Okay. Yeah, that's what I was kind of curious about, is submitting, you know, like for AWS, because it states up above here that we were just reading a second ago that they would have to validate the customer and that the customer had purchased and contracted with that. So I was just kind of curious how they would go about that. And I kind of feel like that would be quite a bit of a strain to get a bunch of requests, like somebody like AWS possibly most likely does. 12 to 16, a HITRUST assessment that reaches its expiration date will automatically unpublish on the expiration date of the certification, which disables the assessment's inheritability. That makes sense. So if it expires, you know, you can't inherit that. 12 to 17, prior to an assessment being unpublished, inheritance providers should respond to all open inheritance requests. 12 to 18, inheritance providers should publish their recertification assessment for inheritance in a timely manner to minimize any downtime impact on their inheritance users. Yeah, I think all of that's pretty straightforward. Bridge assessments, I don't think we've covered yet. But 12 to 19, a bridge certificate does not extend the expiration date of a HITRUST report. As a result, an inheritable HITRUST assessment with a bridge certificate will not extend the assessment's inheritability. So it sounds bridge certificate would be like an extension of sorts, and even if you get that extension, it's not going to allow people to inherit those, which also seems pretty straightforward. Inheritance scoring. I think we did talk about carve-outs a little bit, but there's a lot of material here. To assign an appropriate. Are you coming up on stage, David B? You could just give a presentation on it. I pretty much just watched the webinar itself and then followed along in the book here for the assessment handbook. I think their webinar series is very well done. So they cover things really well. I wish it was better quality because it's 720p and the audio is really in and out at times. Not very high quality audio either, but at least you could pretty much make out what they're saying the majority of the time. And then also they have this decision tree that they ended up walking through the whole process throughout this session as well. But again, it is kind of blurry. 12.2.23 to assign an appropriate inheritance weight percentage. Okay. Let's see. I'm going to try to skim this a little bit. We also have reliance on audits and or assessments performed by a third party. So this is a pretty important section too. So we'll go through this portion. So David B mentions the auditee sends out requests for inheritance and if applicable and comparable, and the company being asked for their permission had that requirement tested on their end. So reliance on audits and or assessments performed by a third party. The results of recently completed audits performed by a third-party auditor against the scoped environment can, at the external assessor's discretion, be relied upon to reduce the extent of the external assessor's direct testing. Oh, I wasn't actually expecting you to actually come up, David.
Well, it was I'll be real quick because I do have to get back to work, but I just thought I love, I love that you're showing this to other people that may or may not have an interest in it, but I think I think that it's so it's well done. It's such a well done framework, and I wish more did this. But again, everybody has to have their differentialities, if you will, to stay in business. But I think with the inheritance being that Chris, you the auditee, we're doing an audit for you, right, Chris? And you say, hey, there's only certain requirements that can be inherited, and they'll tell you whether it's partial or full. And if it's full, then you might as well ask for full inheritance. Now, you still may actually have met the control yourself to a certain point, right? So, but you just kind of have a fallback on that 100% inheritance from AWS or Azure or whatever the case may be, if that makes sense. But at the same time, um, if there's partial, we may, the requirements can have, I don't know, up to like 21 different little articles, if you will. And if you miss a couple of those articles, then that's what we as the auditing firm grade you on and say, basically, you hit the 75 out of 100. And then you go to look at that chart that you pulled up, the mostly, are you still mostly compliant? Yep, you're still mostly compliant. So you can get 100 in that area, et cetera, et cetera. It's a little frustrating when you're trying to, okay, because you have to divide it by it's a little bit of a brain teaser sometimes. However, if you can take
Yeah.
whatever you can get from AWS or Azure or whatever, you might as well, because it just kind of helps with the score.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. I was just kind of curious, like, how they would validate if you're a real customer or not.
I think the whole thing is that obviously, if you started the engagement with HITRUST, then you're a real customer. And then if you're asking for AWS, they just go back and say, "Is AWS a customer of ours? Have they done the HITRUST?" Yes. You have,
I
in
see.
order to get inheritance, you can't. You have to. Excuse me. The other company that you're asking for inheritance from has to have already had and still have a valid HITRUST assessment.
Yeah, I see.
So hopefully that clears anything up. I mean, I think you were doing a great job presenting it from what you know and what you're reading. I really like the way you interpret things and how you read things there. But I know that can be. It was
Yeah.
frustrating to me at first, thinking, "Wait a second, I can inherit this or I
Well,
can't." What are y'all telling me?
Well, and yeah, and so like in regards to your first statement, like I think HITRUST is a really awesome framework and so forth. I think it's a really good advantage point, but there are so many different unique characteristics of it that it's very difficult to break it down if you're just running off of the handbooks. Like I'm sure their training is good and so forth, but like just running off of the handbooks, like I feel it's more for reference than for learning it.
It is. That's what so if you become a high trust and get your CCS, and I'm sorry for cutting you off. I'm just kind of a little bit of
Oh,
a
you're
hurry.
good.
But if you're going to go get your CCSFP to be a certified, uh, I just blanked on the whole damn acronym. But anyways, basically that
Yeah.
you're allowed to audit for them, practitioner, right? So when you
Yep.
do that at the very end, it's an open book test. Well, there's no book that they give you. You're looking at the book right there. And if you guys and gals have ever done an open book test, especially an online open book test, right, where there's no book that you're holding on to, well, you go in there and you hit Control F, and you might find that same word 7,500 times, and now you're trying to parse through where the hell it's actually applicable. That was tough. So it was a 5 day long course, and they slam a lot at you, but then they're like, okay, now take the test, and then you have to go through that. So I'm not knocking it. I'm just saying, hey, you better know, where the reference is, and
So anyways, I digress. I appreciate you, man. Y'all keep up the good work. I got to get back to work, but I'll try to
Yeah,
finish out
no
the
worries.
string. Y'all have a
Yeah,
great
sounds
day.
like a plan.
All
GRC
right.
Mafia. Uh, yeah, and Josh was asking about the decision tree portion, and I put it in chat as well. So it's on video 3 on the webinar series at 41 minutes, but I could not find this image anywhere else. So they literally tell you during the webinar to take a screenshot of it. But also, like I said, that's one of the different things that I was mentioning is that like it's 720p and like even on my end, the text is just not that clear. But that's the best place to go for it. At least you can still read it. But it does, the really cool thing with this, that's why I said that I really like their webinar series here, is that they literally start at the very beginning of this decision tree, and then they move to each and every single portion of it in sequence. And then this is towards the end of it where there's like, okay, so this is what we've covered, and then they go into Q&A. Very good formatting. Yeah, exactly. There is definitely a reason for the workshops and why we're breaking it down a little bit further. Because like even during the webinar series itself, like there's so much that jumps around to it. It's constantly calling to other chapters and so forth as well. And there's a lot of different words like CAP, for an example, which really is just like a poem, really. So different terminology utilized. David B getting all kinds of shout outs in chat. So in regards to the reliance on audits and or assessments performed by a third party, so a validated business justification must exist for relying on the third party report. For example, it is appropriate to rely on a SOC 2 Type 2 report covering a service provider not used by the assessed entity. It's inappropriate to rely on a SOC 2. Yeah, I had to reread that section. I don't know if I said inappropriate. I think I said appropriate, but no, that is not appropriate. 12.3.2, a formal final report documenting the results of a third-party audit must exist prior to the end of the external assessor's fieldwork period. Third-party audits failing to produce, they should be relied upon by the external assessor. So this formal final report documenting the results of the third-party audit must have a description of the audit scope, the time frame that the testing covers for a period of time reports, including point-in-time reports and forward-looking reports, the auditor's procedures performed, the conclusions reached for each control/requirement tested, and the compliance gaps and testing exceptions noted. The third-party assessor, the third-party auditor must be independent of management and objective of the controls and processes audited. Objectively refers to a lack of bias, judgment, or prejudice, and independent means not being influenced or controlled by others in matters of opinion, conduct, etc. Only third-party audits performed by individuals sufficiently independent of the assessed entity and objective of the controls or requirements tested should be relied upon. I wish this was true in all assessments, but that's not. Yeah, we got PBO coming up to, talk about how objective he is.
Facts.
PBO, it ain't, PBO ain't got emotion. He's just, got that business mindset. He's got that MBA, right?
I gotta tell you, facts over feelings. But real quick, you said I was driving. That's really it took me a while to come up. You say 100-353. Everybody said it's voluntary. DOD, you gotta have a FISMA audit every year. It's not, it's not optional. It's mandatory. I do IRS, which sits on top of NIST 800-53. That's mandatory. So those, depending on which federal agency you report to, most of the time it's mandatory. So the two is I never trust the SOC 2 Type 2. So I like to see that.
Well, and so the requirements are based on the agency, right? Like agency policy, is that, or is there like a higher federal?
Higher federal. The IRS says mandatory. You got to pass IRS Pub 1075. So they give you the requirements to pass that. But that sits on top of NIST 800-53.
Yeah, which is why you reference the 1075 all the time.
Because if you look in there, it always says agency defined, right? So the agency defines what that is. And if a federal, it's not mandatory, right? So I need a congratulations from you.
What?
I passed my AWS Associate Architect, so.
Oh, finally! Now you can get that CISSP. You gonna buck that out for next week?
What's up with all the peer pressure? Shout out to me.
Hey, congratulations! You got
just
another AWS cert.
I was renewing my other one. Expires in June, so I was trying to get.
Now you got to go off and get their AI one.
I was looking at that. They got the practitioner and I want to say machine learning associate. I was actually the guy I bought it from. He had that in his videos and study guides. I'm like, ooh. So I don't know. That's a whole nother. I'm leaving that to my man 8-Bit, man. I don't know if I'm gonna put my toe on that.
I think it would be way easier for you coming from a developer background, though.
I did a video about you yesterday. I'm securing it until it gets to. I'm doing it until it gets to the machine learning part, man. We talked about that. I'm not messing with no hallucinations. I'm just pipeline, getting the data, make sure the data is secure, make sure it gets
AI,
to the late.
ML.
Yep. Then when they train it, that's on them, man. But go ahead, my bad. Cool.
Oh, no, you're fine. I was just worried there for a moment when you said you did a video about me and then it's 41 minutes long.
I kept giving you shout outs in there because they had a slide talking about the responsibilities in the AI pipeline. GRC was way at the end. I actually disagreed with them, to be honest. I was like, nah, we too far down. I got to look at because they had a security team looking at some stuff. I'm like, I'm reviewing the security team stuff. So, but nah. Shout out to Cam. Yeah. Cam got it. Give me a shout out. I appreciate you.
Yeah, shout out to PBO.
But yeah, so trying to get how to get a couple of my AWS certs kind of upgraded. So
finally, slacking.
I don't know. I'm
cutting
old.
It close too.
I'm too old to be taking certifications, man. I'm too old to be studying like that. I don't memorize like I used to. Appreciate you, Josh. Appreciate your space tacos.
I mean, hey, if you go off and get that CISSP, you might get that E6.
I hurt my feelings when if they would have. I told you the story.
Looked at that and they were like, "Nah, he doesn't have the CISSP."
No, I was mad because I started off as compliance. Next thing I know, they dropped everybody in the engineering bucket. Man, that should have been a sign that it wasn't for me. But Josh said let his lapse.
Ouch.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of times if you had it before, I think you could kind of put it on your resume and tell people it's expired. But they had a lot of new stuff on there that I was like, oh my god, it was I wouldn't say totally different, but there was a few new services in there that I had to kind of get up to speed on and some new terminology I was a little behind on. From a GRC perspective, right? I'm not architecting, I'm reviewing the architecture, right, to make sure they set it up and understanding the different compliances that sits on top of it, but. That kind of helps me understand, how they're setting their architecture up, and so I can do compliance and figure out the checkpoints and what I need to look for.
Sounds like a plan. Yeah. Also, in the Discord server, Chris C had mentioned last night that CompTIA is looking at releasing a SEC OT plus. Certification potentially, which is like a GRC focused.
SEC OT?
Yeah, it says SEC OT.
I usually think of power plants and stuff and power grids when you say OT, because that's usually offensive threats.
Right.
So that's kind of out of line of but like I said, that's my interpretation of OT.
Well, and like I was just looking it up and so forth, and I had read before OT in terms of operational technology, but But yeah, it's kind of odd. I wouldn't be surprised if CompTIA does go off and do a GRC cert. The reason I mentioned that aspect is because I have the Sec Plus, so like I'm already looking at getting something else because I might as well, because it's got to renew anyhow. I'd be paying like a couple $100 more, but you know, we'll see. Yeah, Cam, that's what Chris C was saying in chat, is that it's slated for 2026.
I need to look at that myself.
Yeah, I think September of 2026 is when my Sec Plus renewal is. I got plenty of CPE for it, but
yeah, facts. That's not up for debate. Cam got it. I am correct.
we're still up for debate on
we're not
hallucination.
debating, Cam.
Well, yeah, I think this may be a conversation at tonight's meeting and so forth, because there's so much more that goes into this. But yeah.
But now, real talk though, Cam is correct, but I think the conversation really goes with the maturity of your company. Most companies are just trying to get an ML model out. They're not even really thinking of hallucinations and all that level. And that's kind of what AWS. Now, AWS is the top of the pyramid. So when they talk about AI ethics and all that. Like, dude, people trying to make money. So I believe it depends on the maturity level for your company. And Chris is right. If your maturity level's high and you got a bunch of GRC people trained up in that, I think they would take that on. Like, most GRC people don't really dive down into development. I developed for 10 years, so I stick my toe all in that because I'm comfortable in that. So I think that would be the same way really with the AI and ML. It's just such at the top of the pyramid. I just don't see a lot of companies, GRC teams capable of doing that.
Yeah, and that I don't disagree with. I think one of the other important factors too is like it's actually like really frustrating because and like Jerry is part of this too, because like Jerry talks about GRC all the time, but he specifically is specialized in cybersecurity GRC. GRC is broader than that though. So, and he's actually further defined that because like for an example, I had mentioned integrated risk management. I went on like a deep dive on that because I had never heard of it before. I read it in that textbook and then I was like, what the hell is integrated risk management? Really interesting concept, only for major enterprises and so forth. If that.
Yeah, I've done that when I was at the state of Indiana, and that's what really opened up my eyes is, and I told you that story before.
Yeah.
They were comfortable with our security team and GRC team. It was a blip on their on their integrated cup, because they're much worried about, because they were collecting taxes. So they were more worried about getting sued, legislation. It was like, and I was like, dude, because in my mind, we the biggest thing on the planet. It was like, number one, which was refreshing. He was like, we have confidence that y'all got that handled. We got way bigger stuff on our plate for financials. And I was like, so that was really eye-opening to me. Because to me, that's the biggest thing, you know, ever, because I work in it. But for the C-suite, they were like, that's a blip. Y'all got that covered. I was like,
yeah.
So,
well, exactly. And but yeah, and it's the same thing like with the AI side of it and so forth, is that like, I mean, we've talked about it before. Most companies don't even have a GRC team in the first place. And especially for a GRC team to be integrated to the extent of actually being communicating directly with these AI ML teams and so forth, like it'd have to be very mature if at all.
I guess the only thing I kind of push back a little bit, any company doing really AI machine learning at the level is probably going to be mature. Most people barely doing ChatGPT. So
the only scary part about that is there's so many AI startups though that are leveraging those APIs and so forth.
I agree with that. I agree with that. They don't give a shit.
That would be the exception.
Yeah, and they don't care. They don't have any rules because they trying to get angel funding. They trying to get VC funding.
Yeah, waving in their SOC 2 report around.
Cam got it. That's a, I won't say a weird mix. I just, like Chris said, GRC is so big and AI is so small, really. So I don't think it'll hurt. I just don't see those two meshing a lot. That's all. The GRC major with the AI minor. Chris, you there? Or are you locked up?
Oh no,
Okay.
I was
you,
reading
you
chat
said, I was
here.
like, well, do I need to keep
Yeah.
going? You didn't move.
Yeah, just
Okay.
struggle streaming here. You know, you got
Chris,
this,
I'm locked
PBO.
up.
Yeah, Josh is mentioning about yeah, thanks for hopping in, Josh. Have a great rest of your day. Hope to catch you later tonight. But yeah, he's mentioning about the glossed over by much of the GRC conversation regarding the maturity levels. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think a lot, especially in GRC, I think a lot of people really overlook that. Once again, I always see GRC teams really with people with federal requirements, be PCI or HIPAA, HITRUST. I'm trying to think if I've worked with a company that had a GRC that didn't have any kind of government requirements on it. Like I said, I just don't see that very often.
Yeah. But it seems like, yeah, they're going to have something already. But let's see here. So third-party audits older than 1 year in age should not be relied upon. This 1 year reliance threshold is determined by comparing. This is another big thing with HITRUST, is that they have so many different requirements for doing this stuff as well. Yeah, there's a lot of information here, but we'll probably start bringing this to an end. We are over that 1 hour mark already. This third video of the webinar series, I'll drop the link one more time before we do bring it to an end. But it almost all covers this section, this chapter 12 in the assessment handbook. And I'll go back to the first section, drop this in chat again. And then we got the discussions for tonight. And then it's the third video on this webinar series here as well. Josh does mention, so we had an outside firm guide point come in, and it was kind of helpful. Jury's still out, but it was eye-opening. And that was in regards to outside firms, consultancies, or internal audit doing a maturity level assessment.
I haven't seen a maturity level assessment probably in a decade. Part of DOD, once again, FSMA, I think it's called CMMI. They figured out the maturity level. Do you have repeatable processes? Do you have optimization? So it's like 5 levels. Level 1 means you just winging it. So we were level 1. We call it Superman. You have one guy with a cape that saved everybody. So I haven't seen a maturity level. I think they kind of squeeze it in, meaning if you have policies and procedures and you have repeatable process, they kind of talk about a maturity level, but I don't think they really dig into it specifically for maturity level.
Well, and I think the ISACA COBIT also covers some of that as well.
It does.
But I don't think it directly addresses the maturity levels.
No, kind of like what I was saying, part of their process, if you do these things, they give you the maturity level. When I was at the government, they said, these are your repeatable processes. These are your optimization. They had those 5 levels. So they specifically talked about your maturity level. Not that if you have these policies and procedures, you were mature. They wanted to see your repeatable processes and optimization and automation in there now.
Yeah. So, yeah, we'll go ahead and bring this to an end. We are over that time period for most people's lunch times. But before we do, don't forget about B-Dubs' website with the weekly blog every Monday, and then also the ongoing CISSP study group. PBO's channel going live at 9 p.m. Eastern every single Tuesday night. And then also our meeting later tonight, 6 p.m. Central. Not only are we doing the group, the job readiness and group resume review tonight, but then also we're going to talk about some of the key sections to look out for those scam boot camps that we talk about all the time. But then also, it sounds like we're going to go through and have a nice heated debate about AI and GRC again.
No, it's not heated. I think we agree. We more discussing the maturity level of the org, right?
Yeah.
That if you do it or not. I just, like you said, I just don't see companies mature enough to dip their toe into that. But
I want to find somebody, like there's got to be somebody in the network that is actually in GRC working with the AI or otherwise. And I'm kind of curious their takes.
Yeah, find somebody. I think it's gonna be hard. I think it's gonna be hard. That's my
yeah. I know a couple of people who helped with the implementation standpoint as far as like third-party vendor stuff and so forth regarding AI. But I'm kind of curious, like, did they do anything regarding like hallucinations or temperature or
reach out to
that kind of
Osier?
stuff?
His network's a little bigger than ours. I think it's out there. I can find them. It's just gonna be hard because you're gonna need to get somebody with OpenSea, a Chat GPT. I think you're gonna need to get somebody super specialized in there. Shout out to Kim. I don't think that's unrealistic. I think you could do GRC and a minor in AI. I'm because when I was in college, I did a bachelor's and I did AI before we had enough computing power to do AI. So I don't think it's unrealistic if you want to do it.
I mean, hey, what was that? Ping pong. There you go. There's early AI.
That wasn't AI. If you do Prologue, it was more machine learning, but it was kind of precursor. But trying to do that on an 88 processor was not cool.
Yeah,
that's before you had multi-cores and stuff. So that's how old I am.
Well, yeah, all the multi-threading and everything.
Yeah,
else.
that's way
it's
before
absolutely
that.
insane to see the amount of power that we have in like abilities now, like cell phones with 8-core processors, and
more.
It's crazy.
Like you got more on your phone that you did to launch a rocket in the 60s.
Yeah, I don't know how. Yeah, that doesn't make me feel too comfortable, to be honest, because we still got really old space stuff up there operating.
Yeah.
So
the weird part that we talked about is, and I'm still perplexed about this, is we don't have enough power. That's why they're trying to start up nuclear power plants. So I'm still perplexed about that. I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
No, I agree with you, Kim. That's a good point.
Yeah, and I was joking about the debate part. I ain't debating anything with PBO. I'm not going to get throat punched here. Yeah, I mean, AI is still a pretty good chunk and so forth, but like it's still like it's popular and so forth, but still like, I think it's still pretty early too.
No, that's a good point. Kim got it on the cloud once we're smiling. I think AI is getting there because NIST has their checklist. AWS has a ton of stuff. Their checklist and their workflow, stuff they're building into their Bedrock model and their SageMaker tools. They building a ton of, because they actually mentioned guardrails in there. So I think they're building those in their tools in there. I just, I just kind of like the cloud for me is you got a data center, you got cloud tools. Now people building AI just as part of their apps and part of you doing it's kind of like integrated in. So
it like AI seeming more of a SaaS product at this point than anything else.
Facts.
Yeah, like there's literally AI startups that are just using SaaS products on the background. So, and a lot of these chatbots that these companies are using too, it's not like they're hosting their own AI.
Facts.
They're just offsourcing that to a third party. So, yeah.
So the question is, how do you review that as a third party? That's kind of what I struggle with.
Space tacos. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. What am I supposed to fix? Yeah, I hope David B is able to join us tonight.
Yeah, shout out to Josh C. Yeah, Guy Point is pretty big. He was talking about consultants coming in. Yeah, depending on what you have them assess. A lot of times I just don't trust third parties coming in, especially once you pay them, they're just trying to check the box. But
or you just got to pay them more, for them to even check the box.
PBO is just kind of a cynic on that.
PBO don't like spending money.
No, I do. I just don't like the. Sometimes they coming up to speed and you coming up to speed. You might be more up to speed than those guys are. So.
Old technology. I see what you're talking about.
Oh,
okay.
Facts.
Yeah, we were talking about like the devices and so forth. Yeah, it's
80.
absolutely insane.
Yeah, that's weird. Like you said, space is still a lot of old technology out there.
Yeah, that's one of my fascinations too, is the cybersecurity for space systems. Tim Fowler is like a recognized, SME for that. And it's a massive issue that's going to happen in the next like 2 decades. So it's already a massive problem now, but nobody really cares. There's a whole book all about it that you can get. Because cybersecurity for space systems is screwed right now, but they're not going to invest the money into it because it's just not a problem yet. It's not going to happen until a high school gets hit or an elementary school gets hit by a satellite coming out of the sky that they're going to care.
Yeah, but that's the same thing with mainframes. Until Y2K came along, nobody really cared.
Yeah.
And it was a mass, So I think that'll
Target
be
and third parties.
Yeah, so that that's how it always works. What time y'all going? 6 tonight or 7? Your time?
7 Eastern.
7 Eastern. What we doing? Resume? You said resumes, or are you freestyling? What we doing tonight?
Yeah, it's job readiness and group resume review.
Okay, that's cool.
Bam. But yeah, we'll go ahead and bring this to an end. I dropped those links in the chat. Thank you guys for hopping in and joining us today. GRC Mafia. Catch you guys later tonight.